Lit. All right, let's get started. So welcome to this workshop called Get Your Sheet Together with Google Sheets, presented by me, JP Nguyen from Hack at UCI. And here's a quick outline of what we're gonna go over. I'm just gonna cover who I am real quick, just so that everyone knows my experience with Google Sheets, and like if you have any questions, you can always ask me. We'll go over an overview of what Google Sheets is. We'll go over some use cases, and then we'll do a whole example walkthrough of a Google Sheet that you could use in your personal life. And we'll also wrap up and have time for any questions or bigger dives into certain parts of Google Sheets if you guys are willing to stay for that long. Cool. Can I just get confirmation that everyone can hear me well? Just type in the chat, you don't need to do anything else. Let's begin. All right. So, who am I? I recently graduated December 2019. I'm a CS major, and I was a logistics co-director for Hack 2019 to 2020, and an organizer for 2018 to 2019. So I've been doing Hack at UCI for around 2 years now. Technically 3 if you count volunteering, but yeah. During that time, I did a lot with Google Sheets, including planning out that or organizing the Hacker applications, doing volunteer schedules, inventory sheets, etc. So since that time, I had been using Google Sheets pretty extensively for organizing and just making sure that everything was ready to go. And I was able to help, or with the help of my teammates, of course, I was able to work on pulling off Hack UCI 2020 and Hack UCI 2019. So now I work at Amazon, so it's kind of weird that I'm doing a Google product, but besides the point, I work as an AWS professional services consultant in Washington now. So that's what I do for my job, but I still use Google Sheets just for personal things like budgeting and all those other stuff. So yeah, with that being said, let's go over a quick summary of what Google Sheets is. I'm pretty sure most of you already know, but we'll just dive into it. So what is Google Sheets? Just an online spreadsheet program that Google offers as part of its Google Suite, which includes other applications such as Google Docs, Google Slides, which I'm presenting on right now, and etc. And the main thing about it is that data comes in tabular form. So if you have taken a databases class, or if you've worked with databases, you may know about the concept of relational databases where everything is organized into tables. And similarly, Google Sheets is basically just a program that allows you to see data in a tabular form with columns and data that are usually matched to the columns, but we can get into that later. So what can it do? You can do a lot with it. You can filter through data. You can do data analysis. You can generate some stats and aggregate some interesting things about the data, and a lot more. There's many possibilities that you can do with Google Sheets. So the benefits of using Google Sheets as a student, especially in your time right now, is that it's really good for organization and collaboration. If you have any team projects, or if you are working in a club and you need to organize some things real quick, then Google Sheets is really good for that, since it allows everyone to be on the same page and show visually. It's better than its other competitors in some aspects. So I don't think anyone knows what Quip is, but we use it. We use part of it at Amazon, and it sucks. And then Excel is also pretty good, but there are some features about Google Sheets that make it more preferable to Excel for different reasons. And the most important thing is that it's online and it's free. You don't need to download anything, and you already have access to it with your UCI accounts. So here are some potential use cases that you may be using Google Sheets. For example, this is one that I created, which is a Gantt chart. If you are going for a PM role, or if you've done any informatics classes, you may have come up upon this, which is just a tool to be able to to schedule tasks and to make sure that you're on track for different projects. So I was able to create this whole thing using Google Sheets for one of the classes, actually project management, informatics 151, I believe. If you are doing any internships and you want to keep track of the status of those internships, whether you sent anything, if you got a response back, etc., then you can use a Google Sheet like our organizer Chase here has done. And it's pretty good to see like where your what you're getting in. You can improve, you can learn what you need to improve on and then grow from there. It's really good for insights like that. And finally, if you, or not finally, but another example would be if you need to budget gas or keep track of the miles that you drive in your car, like our organizer Kaylee here. She is part of a lease that is limited by the number of miles that she can drive in the course of some time period. I don't know the details, but this is a good way to keep track of how many miles that you've driven and how much you've spent on gas to make sure that you're not going over that lease and that you'll be able to keep it within the limit and know what you can and can't do. Finally, you can use it for art, but that is not what we're covering here. But if you want to, after this workshop, you're free to do so. I'm just imparting knowledge for how you can use Google Sheets in other areas. All right, so let's go through an example of a budget sheet that we can use. And the basic overview is that let's say that you bought something at Chipotle, or more likely you bought delivery at Chipotle and you got it to come over and you wanted to track that expense. Then what you can do is you can have a Google form that where you fill out the expense like Chipotle, how much it costed, etc. And that Google form, once it collects that response, will be able to send the data over automatically to a Google Sheet where it collects the data, where you can filter and organize that data, and then you can generate stats and analysis from that data. And once that is done, you're able to visualize and have insight upon how your spending habits are, what you can do to improve them, if you're spending too much money, etc. And here's an example final product. Here are some images of what it looks like, but I'm going to actually go over to that sheet right now. So right here, this is the first sheet. It has all the data that was collected by organizers putting some dummy data on a Google form. And you can see how this data is just a table. You can see the timestamp right here, meaning when it got inserted, the items that were bought, the date that it was bought, which may be different from the timestamp, mind you, in case that you are logging in expenses late. Cost, the vendor, category of spending, method, and any notes that you may want to add onto it. So this is all the data just in its tabular form. And on its own, it just looks like data. There's not much to it. But what you can do is on these other sheets right here. So the first one is some statistics and analysis. You can see how many times that you spent on certain categories like bills and eating out, how much that cost is in total. And then you can also do things like find the largest cost, find the smallest cost, do the average. For fun, we were able to put in a formula that calculates the amount of money that you spend on milk tea based on the expenses, of course, from the data. There's probably a lot more onto that category. And there's a graph that does a cost breakdown by category, and you can see how much was spent on each one. And finally, another one is a budget. So if you wanted to make a budget, you would be able to put what you're expected to spend and how much you actually spent in a month. And you can see these like things called formulas on top. We'll be covering those in this workshop. So you can rest assured that you'll be able to at least come with the knowledge of being able to do that. And on top of that, there are some special formatting things that we're going to cover. You can see how if the difference is greater than, then that means you're spending. That means you're spending within the budget. If it's red, then that means you're spending over budget. and then also a graph to show you those particular points. But we probably won't be able to go over the whole thing, but as time allows. But if you have any questions afterwards on how I was able to do this, just let me know and I'll be happy to cover that. All right. So I believe Chase or Kaylee is going to send a link to this Drive folder right now on the chat, and you can click on that drive. It should be shareable to look at the 2 sheets and a form that we give you here. So it'll be the final product, which is a reference what I just showed you, a Google form for budget expenses that we are going to be using along with sample data. And you are free to follow along if you want to, or just watch. If you want me to slow down, please let me know. I am giving a presentation, but I am happy to make this a discussion for sure. Right? So with that, I'm going to get started as everyone's clicking, copying it over, etc. So in this drive, you can see the example budget sheet that I just showed along with the form and the budget data. We're going to click on the form first, or I'm going to go over the form first. And what's going to happen, or what you can see, sorry, is the form layout in the way that it takes the expense. And this is what's generating our data. As we input it in, we can get like what items we bought, date, cost, etc. Categories, which is a pretty important thing that I will keep, or that I will take note of for later, since we're gonna do that. A method and some notes that of the purchase that you wanted to add if there's anything interesting. If you click on the second tab of the form, you can see the responses. And for now, the responses are pretty bare, and you can see that there's already some charts and some data that you can already examine just on this, and that's totally fine. But if you want to go further, and if you wanted to make more insights into what you're doing, then it's better to connect it to a Google Sheet and transform the data from there. So the way to do that from a Google form is to click on this green square on the top right to create a spreadsheet. You can create a new spreadsheet, or you can select an existing one. I'm going to connect the existing one that's already on the drive. So I'll do select an existing spreadsheet, click on select on the bottom right, and we should be able to see budget data right there. So I click on select, it's going to link to a spreadsheet, and then it will redirect me over to this sheet right here. So if you go in, okay, cool. So I'm going to delete this real quick. So now we're on the Google Sheet that is connected to the form, and you can tell that's happening by this, by looking at the sheet and seeing this purple icon right here to be able to tell that that data is connected. And as you fill out that form, that data should be sending over to the spreadsheet. If you do want to follow along, just so I don't forget, make sure you do a copy of the form, since you shouldn't be able to edit it to my knowledge right now. So just copy the form if you want to follow along, or if you want, you can also look at the budget data in the folder, and I'll be doing it in front of you guys as well. But okay, so we have only 2 rows right here, and that's kind of boring. So what I'm going to do is copy the data over, or some dummy data that we have already prepared for you guys over here. And I'm going to do that real quick. Cool. So here's all this dummy data, and now we have a lot more data that we can work with, which is more fun. And I'm just going to delete this because we don't need this anymore. Okay, so as I said before, this is just all the data in its tabular format. And on its own, it's fine. But there's already one feature that we can do to be able to make this a bit more interesting. So let me first, what I like to do first is rename the sheet so it's more descriptive or at least more concise in what it is for me. And I'm going to call it data. So I'll be able to refer to this data sheet later on when I start making those other sheets with the statistics and such. But for now, you can see how there's all these rows. And on the top, there's a header row that details what each column stands for. And we already covered that. What you can do is do something called a filter, where you are able to click on this data, data right here. And you can either create a filter from here by clicking on create a filter, or you can click on the filter symbol, which is the second from the right symbol right here. And what that should do is do this fancy visual thing where you're able to now do interesting stuff already just from this. So you can click on the 3 lines on date, for example, and have it sort in ascending order. Somehow we made a purchase. Somehow we made a purchase on January 23rd, 12:30. But besides the point, you can see how the data is already transformed in an interesting way so that you can see in a chronological order where you spent your money. If you want to do things like see all of the stuff that you spent on eating out. So you can single out the eating out value by clicking on eating out here. And it should show all the expenses that you spent eating out. And this is already a more informative way to work with your data and see it in a new light. But we can do a lot more, and keep in mind that doing a filter of the data does not transform the data. All of the things or all of the rows are still there. It's just hiding those rows for you. You can notice on the right side, or sorry, on the left side, where there's singled out rows that match the filters that I have placed upon the data. Are there any questions on like filtering before I move on? You can put it in the chat and I will be reading it most of the time anyway, so it's cool. All right. If not, I'm going to move on if that's okay. So let me turn off the filter real quick. And what we're going to do is create a new sheet that has interesting data that we can work with. So let's click on this plus on the bottom left that says add sheet. Excuse me. And then let's get started. So let's say you wanted to see how much you're spending in each category over the course of the time that you've started this sheet. So let's call this categories. Let me actually make this a lot bigger. That is not a lot bigger, but it's okay. And we're going to have specific headers that we want just for our purposes to be able to know what each data point means. So we're gonna have something like category. We will have something like total count. So how many times that category has an expense overall, and also total cost, like that. So real quick, I'm going to refer back to this form right here with the questions. And I'm going to copy all of these categories. So bills, education, groceries, eating out, services, fun, gas, and other. Like that. Okay, cool. So now, does anyone have an idea of how you can get the total count of a category? You can type it in the chat, or you can, I don't know if there's a way to like raise your hand or something, but if there's a way to raise your hand. Any guess is fine. You can be wrong. It's okay. Fail fast. This is all learning. Ooh, nice. Okay. Thank you, our seated organizer, for answering that question. So we can do something called a count. Count formula, which I'll explain in a bit. So we will be able to smartly count all of the data. Now, the dumb way, or the manual way of doing things, would be to look at this sheet and literally count how many times something like eating out appears on the sheet, and you're going to lose track so fast because our dumb human brains could not remember things really easily. So a better way to do it would be to do something called a formula. And these formulas are what makes a spreadsheet interesting, in that it will equate or generates new data that can also be analyzed and also make your statistics more interesting. So a formula is different from just a normal text. For example, right here, you can see how on this top right here, let me see if I can actually, whoops. Nope, that's not gonna work, it's okay. But you can see how that the data itself is just called bills. There's nothing that's interesting about it, or there's no equation that's there. But right here, you can see this fx, and that is what this equal sign does. Any cell that starts with an equal sign will take whatever you put after the equal sign and equate, or what is it? Evaluate it, there you go, and then give you back the result. So for example, an example would be like 2, right here. This is just the number 2. But if I do equals 2 plus 2, what should I get? Thank you. Thank you, Jose. You're my new favorite. All right. So if I press enter, now that becomes 4. And this data will basically be generated even if the formula is expected to change. And that will make more sense in a bit. But for now, that is what a formula is. And we're going to use something called a count. Specifically, something called COUNTIF, which is essentially a formula that will generate the count for how many rows fulfill a particular condition. And COUNTIF, you can think of like a function, if you're CS oriented, to take in 2 parameters. It's going to take in data, and then it's going to take in some condition that the data should be equal to. If that data is equal to that condition, then it'll be added to the count. So let's say that we're going to do it for bills first, right? For bills. And we want to get the data, or the whole data set. And in order to reference the data set, we're going to do something like this. The reason why I named it data is so that I could do data equal, exclamation point, and then refer to the whole data set via like a row column form that I don't want to get into too much, but it's intuitive enough to be able to understand. So if you go back here, we're going to see that it starts from A2 and then it goes to A62. But since we're focused on the categories, let's go to the category side right here. And you can see that the first entry is actually F2. The data set that we're looking for is this category, or this column right there. So we're going to refer to it as F2 and F2 right there. And then to be lazy and safe, I would just do F here so that it just refers to the whole column. But you can also explicitly say that like you just want from F2 to F37 or whatever, but for now we'll just do F right there. And then finally, if we want to count how many times bills appears in this data set, what is the condition? Yes. So I understand what Ian's saying. Basically, you just want to make sure that's equal to bills. So it can be something like this. Ooh, let's not do that. Just say bills. So keep in mind though, I'm going to immediately fail on something and I'm going to see if someone knows why. But with that being said, let's just do this. So if we want to get the total count, we're going to do equals to start the formula. Count if a conditional count across a range. Perfect. It's already telling us what to do. If we do data, exclamation point F2 to F, you can see how it's highlighting it in a color. That's the way that we know that it's already referencing a data sheet somewhere else, comma. Then our next parameter is going to be bills. And if we press enter, what? That makes no sense. Why do we get 0? Yes, thank you, Monica. So bills on its own is not really, it doesn't equate to anything in a formula, but the string bills, which is a way that we can refer to it by doing double quotes, will be able to equate to the string bills. And with that, now we can actually match it. And from there, we should get a total of 8. So there are 8 expenses in the data that are apparently connected to that category. So there is one way to make this smarter, which would be to, instead of setting it as the exact string bills, we can set it to another data reference, which is this A3 right here that already has that bills string as a value. And with that, we should get the same answer. And that is basically how you would be able to get that formula there. Now, I want to be able to do it for every single category, and a tedious way to do it would be to do COUNTIF for every single one, but we don't got time for that. We got other things to do. So we're going to instead do a copy and paste, like an essay. And once we go on this next cell, we're going to paste. But there is a problem with this. Can anyone find out what the problem is with this current formula? Yes, thank you, Monica and Tyler. So that data is a bit off-centered because now it's referring to F3 instead of F2. We want to get the whole column, but we skip out on a row if we copy it down. And that is because there are, when you copy and paste, Google Sheets or any spreadsheet program really does the smart thing where it will change these references based on like their position relative to where you copied and pasted. So since you moved this down, the data set will also move down and the condition will also move down. The condition we do want to move down because we want to refer to education now instead of bills, which is so A4 instead of A3, but this data set we want to maintain. And a way to do that while you're copying and pasting is to do something, I don't know the exact term, but it's basically like locking the data reference in so that you don't change the movement of it whenever you copy and paste. And that is done by doing something like, or something with dollar signs. So dollar signs here. This is the same as data exclamation point F2 colon F, but when you copy and paste it over, it will maintain its value and not move it and relevant to where, or contextually based on where it is. It will stay data exclamation point F to F. And a way that we can do that here is a shortcut. If you're taking notes or whatever, it's fine, but I can just type it right here. Where if you go on this, wherever you want to lock in, you can press F4 to be able to lock that set in. So to lock the set F4. And this is the key F4. This is the key F4. So now that we have this, if we copy this down to education, of course, nothing changed, but we could see that now it's referring to the correct data set. Thank you, Tyler and Monica, for answering those questions. And Ian and Jose, I'm really appreciating it. So we can copy and paste like that. And there's many other ways to do it, but one neat way or one visual way to do it would be to click on the bottom right of a cell and then press hold and drag so that it will copy that formula down to the rest of the cells. And voila, we got all of the total counts for every single category. And we only really needed to work on one formula, but with that one formula, we're able to get this much data from there. Are there any questions about like getting this total count? Or anything at all that may have been confusing? Hotkeys to anchor the values. Yeah, so like I said, F4, the key F4, I don't know how to do this, but like the key F4 would be a way to do it after you type in the range that you would want to normally do it. Yeah, after you lock the range that you want to maintain, and the values are the same. So if I go into this bills, for example, and go to this value, if I click on F3, it will do the same exact thing. It will lock that value over. And if I try to, for example, copy it down to education, it will stay as 8. Does that answer your question? Cool, no problem. So moving on, we're going to go over the next one, which is total cost, which is a bit more interesting. So if we go back here, you can see that the cost column is right here, and it has all of these values that we want to add together based on whatever category they're a part of. But the thing is, we can't just use this one column alone because we need to also refer to this column right here, the category column. Sorry, excuse me. So right here, we actually want to refer to both cost and category when we create or when we try to add all the costs together. And of course, dumb way would be to click on every single reference that matches a category and then do the plus sign and then try to add them like that. No, we're not here for that. You did not sign up for this. So the formula that I would like to introduce to you guys would be a sum if, which is similar to sum, except there's an if. So the way that you would do this is that you specify the condition data or I believe that it's, wait, let me think. Yeah, condition data, and then the condition, and then the data that you want to add. So basically it's saying that whatever data on this first parameter matches this condition, then you add it to the total sum or you add this particular value on the data set to the total sum. So for example, if we're gonna do bills, the condition data on this case is not going to be F2F because that is the category. Or, sorry, I misspoke. Yes, it is going to be F2F because that is the column. If we go back here, this is the column that we want to look at to match those conditions. So we're going to go back and we'll just copy this over. Whoops, that's not you copy. We'll just copy this over here. And then we'll copy this over here because we want to keep that condition. And the data that we're going to add is not going to be part of the category. There we go. It's going to be part of cost. And that's going to be the D column. So instead of F2F, it's going to be data D to D, like that. So if we were to add this or put this in, it should look something like this, F2F, and then a 3 data D to, whoops, D to the F4 there. If I press equals, now I should get the total cost. And just for formatting purposes, we can click on this format as currency button that they conveniently have on the toolbar to be able to make this currency. And because I already did the anchoring that I talked about before with F4, I can easily just move this over and copy it. Another way to do it would be to copy the formula on its own, select all the cells that you want to copy it to, and then press paste. And that should be able to get all the total costs there. Are there any questions about that? Pretty simple. Shouldn't be too hard. All right, I'm going to do that. Okay, so if anyone needs this, this is going to be recorded. So you can refer back to this later, but for now, I'm going to delete this. And you can always Google the formulas as well. There's a lot of documentation and references to what I covered, which is going to be very helpful if you want to dig into more formulas to make interesting things. But you can already see here that we can get interesting information about the data more so than if we just did Google Forms or if we just like didn't even keep track. So we can see that on other things that we spent over $1,000 easily, which is concerning. But generally, you can do a lot of interesting stuff with this data and go from there. And I think I have time for like 2 or 3 more things. Is there a way to expose the formulas? That is a good question. I do not know, to be honest, but I can get back to you. Or if there's anyone else that knows, then they can totally answer. But good question though, that's a good question. But from there, let's do some fun stuff. So now that we have the data, we can now format it in a visual way that makes it a lot easier to read. So what I'm first going to do is insert one column and then insert one row above and left. And I'm going to resize the columns that are surrounding the data because I am extra. And the way I was able to select multiple columns was, I think in Windows it's Control, in the Mac it's the Apple key. Press and hold that Apple key and click on multiple columns to be able to mass select. Right click, resize selected columns. I'm going to do 20. Control, neat. Okay, so now, thank you, Monica. People write that down. I had no idea if that's actually true or not because I'm not on Windows. But there you go. We can resize the columns like that. Now, the cool thing about Google Sheets that I don't think Excel has and Quip does, but it sucks, is that you can mass delete many rows and mass delete many columns, and it'll look visually nice. And the way I'm going to select all of these rows is not by scrolling down to the end of the sheet and holding shift and clicking on it, because I don't got time for that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do Control Shift down, and it will go from wherever row that you highlighted and select all the way down to the end of the sheet. I'm going to repeat that, and if you need the command, I believe someone can type it, but it's going to be Control. So start from the row, Control Shift down, and it's going to select every single row. And from there, I just have to right click and delete. And this is nice. There's no extra rows. There's just this empty space, and it allows me to look at this and not want to throw my computer away. Same thing with columns. I'm going to click on this column that I don't want, Control Shift right this time, right click and delete. And now I just have all the data that I am interested in, and I can start formatting right here. I'm going to do this real quick because you can learn most of these on your own, but I'm just going to select all of these cells. I'm going to merge. I'm going to select all the data, and then I'm going to center it both text aligned and also like in the cell. Let's resize this row because it's like the header row to be 50. Let's resize this row because it's like the column row to be 30. Let's make this bigger. And let's make it even bigger. Let's make these bigger too, to like 14. No, too big, too big, too big, too big. 12. These can probably be a little bit bigger. Let's make it 11. And then let's also color these. So let's do like a dark with a white, make it bold. Make these bold too. Whoops, white. And then we'll make it like one shade smaller. There we go. And then we'll also bold these because these are the categories and that's what we want to look at. Like that. And let's actually add one more row that could be interesting. Let's do total. I'm gonna rename these to count and cost. Count and cost. And then let's actually have this be a sum of all the data that's right here. So Google's smart, it can recommend things that you want, and sometimes it's right and sometimes it's wrong, but this time it's right, so it's cool. It added the sum of all of these so that we know how much you spent in total. Let's resize this row to 30, make this big, make this like, well, 12 is fine. And then we'll make this bold. Let's merge these two. And then here is a small like cheat that you can do. If you notice, like if I select all of this and try to get rid of the borders so that it looks nice, if I click on the borders and I try to click on clear borders, nothing changes because that is the default color of a border in Google Sheets. And for good reasons, that's good because you don't want to like accidentally mess up knowing where the cells are. But since we already know where the cells are, we don't really need it anymore. And the way I would fix this would be to, let's say I wanted to select this row and have it blend in with the background color. The background color is white. So if I just set a white border and then I only do the virtual or the vertical lines, it is basically invisible at that point. And I can do the same for this column right here. This column and this column. There we go. And then do the horizontal. Neat. I'm going to select this whole thing. There's like these annoying gray things, so I'm going to do the outer border as well so that it's cleaned up. And finally, to make this pop out, I'm going to, instead of a black, add in like or white, sorry, add in a black border all the way around the data set and make it a bit thicker. So that pops out like that. And same thing here. Since the total is going to be a interesting part of it, I'm going to add this vertical line on top like that. But yeah. Thank you, Chase. I appreciate it. But yeah, so this is a pretty, you could tell like it's transcended like just looking at like a spreadsheet with a bunch of stuff. And now it's more like a visual tool that will be updated as you add more data. And we're running, we got a couple minutes left. I'm going to show 2 more things, I think, is what I have time for before questions. Yeah, so let's add in a few more rows on the bottom. And let's insert a chart. So if we insert a chart, take some time. Wow, that's huge. I'm not going to do that. Let's do that big right here. And this chart editor, pretty simple. It's pretty easy to intuitively get what it's doing. But what you can do is you select the chart type. You select a data range. So my data range, I actually want to look at just this, not the total, just that. Okay. And immediately it does stuff for me, which is nice. But the label, which is like the label of the section, is going to be the category part. So like bills, education, etc. And the value is currently count. But let's say I want, instead of count, I want to do cost instead. So I can click on the value on the right side to be cost, and that's a better like illustration of what I want to look at. And I'm able to visually see in this way how those numbers here look in a proportion, as a proportion of the total spending. From here, I can be like, oh, wow, I'm spending way too much on fun. I should cut down. Or I'm spending decently on other. Maybe I should separate that into its own category if those happen to be different things that I want to save money on. Or maybe set up as a separate category to further allocate my budget on instead. And of course, this is, keep in mind, this is data that's aggregated over the entirety of the sheet. It's not going to be singled out to different months. If time allows, we can probably cover that, but for now, just keep in mind that this is a potential thing that you can do. And since the charts are always going to be like within the confines of the sheet and will not affect anything, you can just probably set all of these borders to be white. And there you go. If you zoom out, this is a pretty simple sheet that you can already use. Yeah, so simple sheet that you can already use. And you can see how all this data is here. Keep in mind that this data is coming from a Google form. And we can show that it's still going to work by going to that Google form right now. Let's say I wanted to, I'm going to send it to myself. Whoops, copy, paste. And let's say I decided to buy, give me an item to buy. Cookies, thank you. Cookies and a potato, sure, I'll do that. So cookies and potato. Let's say I bought it today. I bought it for, how much are cookies and potato? I don't even know. Say $10, $10.99. Let's say I bought these from Target because I know that's open right now. Let's say that this is for groceries. Wow, cookies and potato. And then let's say I used credit Any notes? Nah. Let's press submit. My expense has been recorded. If I go back here, I think I need refresh, but let me do that. Oh, is it still sorted by the, whoops, it is still sorted. Okay. I'm going to look for this potato. There we go. There we go, right there. So you can see here how that new response is there. Yeah, it's really weird. I don't know why it's placing it in 54, but maybe it's because we copied and pasted it weird. But it's right here, and this updates all the data on here. We should have kept track of what the old values were, but rest assured, since the data is there, and that these are referring to the full columns, that should be reflected upon the sheet. And let me rename this real quick to categories. Okay, so that is it for this part. I'm gonna go back real quick to the slides. Right here. So wrap up. What did we learn? I taught you a bit about formatting, how to delete rows and columns en masse. Freezing, I didn't get to, but we can talk about that if anyone's interested. Filtering, some key shortcuts that I showed, data referencing. We did cover formulas like COUNTIF, SUM, and SUMIF. We didn't cover query, but query is very powerful. If anyone does want to dive in further, I am happy to do so, but that is fine. And then charts. Charts, which are pretty easy on its own. So I'm going to, after Zach, after. So before that, does anyone have any questions? You can feel free to type in the chat. You can also feel free to unmute your mic and say it to my face. I am open. I'm open. If not, if there's no questions, I'll just get into queries. Y'all too much. Y'all too much, man. SUMIF taken to, that is a good question. Oh shoot, I just escaped the chat instead of what I wanted. There you go. So ignore that. We're not done yet. So let's say we wanted to do more conditions to sum up. And this goes for a lot of these other formulas that are like ifs, like COUNTIF and SUMIF, right? And let me just do a new sheet like that, and let's increase it. So there is SUMIF, which is the singular one where you just check in one condition. And there is a formula that's specifically tailored to multiple conditions called SUMIF with an S, with an extra S. With an extra S. And the way that the parameters are formatted are a bit different from SUMIF for no apparent real reason, but for now, just accept it the way it is because it still works. So if we remember correctly, SUMIF takes in the condition data first, and then the condition, and then the data that you're going to sum. For SUMIFs, what it takes in first is actually the data that gets summed, and then a paired, like you list off each pair in condition, data, and then condition like this. Condition, data, condition, dot, 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 like that. So it takes in multiple conditions like this. Let's say that you have one column that has one condition, like all the eating out things. You can put it there, and then you can also say, and I also want to check if there are any costs that are greater than $1,000 or something like that, then you'd put it as the next condition and so on and so forth. You can add as many conditions as you want in the sum ifs, and if you press enter, it should calculate the right answer or the answer that you want. Does that answer your question? Cool. Yeah, keep that in mind. Same thing with countifs. Countifs, it does things like, I'm gonna decline that call. It does things like condition, or it's like data. I'm not gonna do this. I'm not sure if this is actually the way that I think it does, but count ifs is also a formula, I believe, that you can do where it counts multiple or how many rows that where those two conditions match. If you're talking about like a multi-condition that's like within this condition, there is information about that you can Google up. I don't personally have it right now, but you could do stuff like an and or an or, etc. like that. 1 second. And you can look those up. But yeah, I'm going to delete that real quick. And if there's any other questions, feel free to do so. But while we're on the subject, Zach wants me to cover queries, so I'm going to cover queries. And if you are familiar with databases, or specifically relational databases, and specifically the SQL statements, they look something like select star from table where blah, 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 blah. And this is a SQL query that is used to fetch data from a table that matches certain conditions like so. Now, we have something similar in Google Sheets called query that takes in two parameters. Data, so like as usual, the data that we want to query, and some query string that is similar to SQL language. And with this, we'll be able to do two things. One, get not just one value, but all values or all rows that match certain conditions. And two, specify only specific columns that we want to get. So let's do some interesting stuff. Let's say that we wanted to get all the items, dates, and costs that are from Costco. Yeah, let's do that. So our data set is going to be from B2. It's going to be, I'm going to highlight B2 to, whoops, to like E63. Again, I'm just going to do E, but data B2 to E63. And then our query string will look something like this. Select B, C, D. You don't need to say the from because the from is already in the data. Where, I believe it's, what were you looking for? Oh, Costco. So E is equal to Costco, like that. There's going to be a query string, and let's say that we put that in the formula now. So query is equal to data B2 to E, comma, string select B, C, D, where E is equal to Costco. And if I press enter, bam, we get every single row where this query, or where E is equal to Costco, and we only get the B, C, and D columns. Now, there is one caveat to this, and it's very important. You can see how these, all of these things, save for the top left cell, has the formula, but everything else is like data. let's say I want to just change the data for any reason in the cell. Let's say I just want to do 20 instead. Enter. Whoops, I broke it. So this query needs to make sure that the resulting cells or the cells that it's going to cover with its result are empty. And that is just to maintain the data and to maintain the query itself, because you don't want to feed any information that doesn't match or isn't related to the query at all. And you can see this error with this red here. Array result was not expanded because it would overwrite data in D8. So to make sure that this doesn't happen, make sure that there's no data in those cells. Now, let's say that I just did this query to be able to get this data, but I didn't exactly want to do anything. Like, I just wanted to do a query once and then work with the data afterwards. The way that you can do it is, remember that one trick I showed you with the command or control shift, sorry, not command, Apple or control shift down and right, where you would mass select rows like this, like that. You could do something similar with data, where if you go to a data cell that you are, of course we can do this, I know, but let's say that you had like, let's say that we did something stupid like this, where we just got every single thing. Dragging is going to take a lot of time. So a way that you can work with this is you go from that cell, you do that thing I said, command shift down, and it goes all the way. Let me get rid of that, sorry. So we go command shift down, and it goes all the way down to the first non-empty data cell, which Google assumes will be part of the data set. And then if you want to continue adding, you can do command shift right to go all the way to the right up until there's a non-empty cell right there. And from here, you can do a copy. And then if you wanted to paste it, you can do a right click, paste special, and paste the values only. Or you can do the shortcut, which is shift, the key, and then V. I don't know what Windows has, but probably something similar. And from there, now you'll be able to change all these things to whatever you want, like so. But yeah, and this is what I did with the hacker applications, because we wanted to put a status on whether or not they got accepted or not, but we did want to do interesting stuff like filter and look at the data differently. So yeah. Are there any other questions or anything that people want me to cover? There's a lot more features on Google Sheets that I have not covered. How does freezing work? Good question. So I'm going to cheat and take this out first. Normally, if you look at a data sheet, let's say you wanted to look at like the 51st column or 51st row, and then go to like whatever this is, but you want to know what this, like credit, you want to know what this cell is referring to or what column it's a part of. One way to do that, if you happen to forget, because we're humans, we forget sometimes, is we can go all the way back up to method or to the header and see what it is. But that is not good, because like if we have like 1,000 rows and we try to look at like 1001 and we want to go all the way up to the column, like, yeah, scrolling is an option, but there are better ways to use the features of Google Sheets to benefit you. So let's say that you put, you wanted to freeze, oh, we are covering freeze. So freeze the rows that are on top, specifically that header row, right? So instead of going to edit or data or any of that, because it's not editing the data it's not even like changing the view. It's just it's not transforming it at all. It's just changing the view of the data. What you can do is click on view. You go to here, which says freeze, and then you want to click on one row to specify just the first row should be frozen. And from there, if I want to go to like 51, oh, credit, what is that referring to? Method. That's not a scroll, that's just a look up, and it's really easy to do. You can also do columns where if you freeze, let's say you froze up to this column, right, the item column, you get to see both this header. Of course, these change, but if we go this way, then we could see like what item referred to which one if we want to do those types of interesting things as well. And keep in mind, like freezing these rows, you can still merge these. You can still merge them. You can still do whatever you want. Like this is all still available. But I'm going to take those out. Cool. Are there any questions or any features that people want me to cover? I will take your silence as a no, and I will continue or to the end of the presentation. All right, so if there's no other questions, Zach, if you had a row in the data you're querying, would it dynamically add the row to the sheet you made the query from? Yes, yes. As you, similar to what we did with the sheet, as we showed, when we go to the form, we went back and the categories changed. If you add a row to the data, as long as the data reference matches all the data, like if you cover all the data in that regard, when you add a data row or you change that part of the data in any way, it will reflect on not just querying, but any formula that you happen to use that references that set. But yeah, feel free to, I don't know, I don't think my contact information is there. Hopefully not. But like, if you have any questions, feel free to talk to me or talk to anyone else privately on the chats if you want, or any form of media that you feel like talking to me to. I hope you learned something today, whether it's something small, whether it's a lot. Hopefully you can see how beneficial Google Sheets can be to your life, and you'll be able to take this knowledge and learn other ways in which you can organize your life in a fun way. So thank you. Please, 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 Chase and, yeah, perfect. Chase is posted a feedback form that you can use to fill out. We're going to be filtering this data and seeing what you say. I'm kidding. We would like to get as much feedback as possible for any workshops that you guys want to do, whether later in the, actually I work now. I don't know what week you guys are in, but later this quarter or next quarter or any other time, we want to be able to do workshops that are beneficial to you guys and are things that you want to learn. And the best way to do that is to give us your feedback and tell us how we did and what we can improve on. So, yep, thank you guys so much. If you want to hang out and ask any more questions and learn more things, feel free to do so. But yeah, thank you for having me.